was already late when my shoulder clipped hers, and in that single careless second, my life tilted, quietly, the way a glass tips before it shatters. The street outside my parents' house was crowded with honking cars and the smell of fried bread from a vendor down the block. I had rehearsed my apology for being late to dinner while jogging across the cracked sidewalk, phone buzzing with my mother's impatient messages. I never saw the woman step out from between two parked cars. I only felt the soft resistance of fabric and bone, heard a sharp intake of breath, and then her bag spilled open at our feet. Coins scattered, beads rolled like tiny planets. A folded scarf slid into the gutter. "I'm so sorry," I said, already kneeling, my hands shaking with embarrassment and urgency. "I didn't see you." She was older than I first thought, her hair silvered and braided, her eyes dark and steady in a way that made me slow down despite myself. People passed us without stopping. Someone laughed. Someone muttered something unkind. The woman said nothing at first. She watched me gather her things, watched the way my fingers trembled. When I offered the bag back, our eyes met. Her gaze felt like a hand on my chest. "You are rushing toward a table where you are never fed," she said softly. I blinked. I'm late for family dinner." A pause, then a small, sad smile. "Yes, that is what I said." I laughed awkwardly, standing up too fast. "Look, I'm really sorry. Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "Pain comes in many forms." I pressed a few bills into her palm, more to escape than to help, and she closed her fingers around them without looking. As I stepped away, she added, almost gently, "Tonight, you will be seen for what you are, not what they say you are." I didn't respond. I didn't look back. I told myself she was just a stranger, just words said to 100 people a day. I hurried on, the house lights ahead glowing warm and unforgiving. Inside, the noise hit me like a wave. Laughter, clinking plates, my sister's voice rising above the rest. I slipped off my shoes and tried to blend into the wall, already feeling 12 years old again, already bracing. "You're late," my mother said, not quietly. "Traffic," I said. I ran most of the way. My father didn't look up from carving the roast. Always an excuse. I sat where there was space, which was not a place saved for me. Conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. When I tried to speak, it stalled, then restarted without me. My sister announced her promotion to cheers. My cousin joked about responsibility and people who can't get it together, eyes flicking toward me with practiced innocence. The food arrived, plates were passed. Mine came last, thinner, as if by accident. When I reached for bread, my aunt laughed. "Careful," she said. "Wouldn't want you getting comfortable." I smiled because that was what I did. I swallowed because that was what I did. Each comment landed, small and precise, 1,000 paper cuts disguised as family humor. Someone asked when I'd finally figure things out. Someone else suggested I was lucky to even be invited. I remembered the woman's eyes, the way she said seen. The pain wasn't loud. It was the steady pressure behind my ribs, the familiar knowledge that I could disappear from this table, and the meal would continue, uninterrupted. I sat there, chewing slowly, feeling something old and heavy settle in my chest, unaware that this quiet hurt was only the beginning. Family discomfort was never allowed to remain silent. It had to be displayed, shared, turned into entertainment. Dinner plates were barely cleared when my mother stood up, tapping her glass with a spoon. "Before dessert," she said brightly, "let's talk about something important." My stomach tightened. I kept my eyes on the table, already knowing. She smiled in my direction, the kind of smile that looks loving to outsiders. "Everyone here works so hard. We're all moving forward in life. Promotions, businesses, plans. It makes me proud." A pause. Not everyone, of course. A few chuckles rippled around the table. My sister leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, watching me like this was a show she'd paid for. My father finally looked up, his expression flat, expectant. "You know," my mother continued, "some people just don't take responsibility. They drift, they make excuses, and then they wonder why life doesn't reward them." Someone laughed louder this time. An uncle nodded as if this were wisdom, not cruelty. I felt heat climb up my neck. "Mom," I said quietly, "can we not do this now?" She waved a hand. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. We're family. If we can't be honest with you, who can?" Honest? That word landed harder than the jokes. My cousin chimed in. "Yeah, you should listen. Maybe this will finally motivate you." Motivate you? To be less of an embarrassment. The unspoken ending hung in the air. My father cleared his throat. "Your mother's right. At your age, you should have more to show. Look at your sister. Look at everyone else here." All eyes turned to me. Forks paused. Smiles sharpened. I tried to explain. About the job I was building, the plans I hadn't shared yet, the setbacks I'd handled alone. But every sentence was interrupted. Excuses. Same story. Always almost there, never actually there. The words stacked up, one on top of another, until they pressed the air out of my lungs. I glanced around the table, searching for even one face that looked uncomfortable. There wasn't one. This was accepted. Normal, maybe even expected. Someone pulled out a phone. Wait, my sister said, laughing. "This is too good, say that again." Humiliation burned hotter than pain. My hands curled into my napkin under the table. I felt small, reduced to a punchline, a lesson in what not to become. And then, like a final twist of the knife, my mother said, "Honestly, sometimes I wonder where we went wrong with you." The room went quiet, not in sympathy, just in anticipation. Something in me shifted then. Not anger, not tears, just stillness. I thought of the woman on the street. You are rushing toward a table where you are never fed. I stood up. Chairs scraped, heads tilted. "I think I'm done," I said. My voice surprised me with how calm it sounded. My father frowned. "Sit down, don't be dramatic." I picked up my jacket. "I came because I thought this was family. I see now it's just an audience." My sister scoffed. "Wow, victim again." I didn't reply. I walked out while dessert was being served, laughter restarting behind me before the door even closed. Outside, the night air hit my face, cool and sharp. My phone buzzed, messages already forming, explanations demanded, jokes probably continuing without me. I kept walking. The humiliation clung to me like smoke, but beneath it, something unfamiliar was taking shape. A silence, not empty, not weak, but deliberate. For the first time, I didn't rush back to fix how they saw me. I let the quiet stretch, not knowing yet that this silence would become my power. Didn't go home after I left. I walked until the streets thinned and the noise faded, until my thoughts finally caught up with my body. The night felt wide, like it was waiting to hear what I would say next. I said nothing. That was new. Normally, after dinners like that, I would replay every word, draft long explanations in my head, plan messages I would never send. I would try to prove, if not to them, then to myself, that they were wrong. That night, I put my phone on silent and kept it there. Messages still came. I could see the screen light up in my pocket, feel the vibration against my leg. I didn't check. Each unanswered buzz felt like a small rebellion, a refusal to step back into the role they'd written for me. I ended up at a park bench under a flickering streetlight. The wood was cold through my coat. I sat there for a long time, listening to distant traffic, watching my breath fog the air. The woman's voice came back to me, uninvited but steady. "Tonight you will be seen for what you are." "By who?" I whispered to the empty bench. Not them, I realized. Not anymore. Over the next few days, the silence deepened. I didn't call my parents. I didn't respond to my sister's sarcastic voice notes or my aunt, just checking in texts that felt more like surveillance than concern. At first, it felt wrong, like holding my breath too long. Then it started to feel clean. Without the constant noise of their opinions, I noticed things I'd been ignoring. How much energy I'd spent managing their expectations. How often I'd minimized my own plans before they could mock them. How my life had been shaped around avoiding their disappointment instead of building my own satisfaction. Work became quieter, sharper. I arrived early. I stayed focused. The project I'd been developing on the side, The one I'd never mentioned at family dinners because it wasn't real enough yet began to take clearer shape. I stopped doubting every decision halfway through making it. One afternoon, my mother finally called. I watched her name light up on the screen until it stopped. 5 minutes later, a message came through. "We were only trying to help you. You embarrassed us by leaving like that." I deleted it. That was when I understood the real cost of silence. It wasn't just peace, it was distance. And distance meant I could see them more clearly. The jokes weren't jokes. The advice wasn't guidance. It was control disguised as concern. Weeks passed. The silence unsettled them more than any argument ever had. My father sent a clipped message asking if I was still sulking. My sister posted exaggerated family photos online, captions heavy with words like together and grateful, each one a quiet jab meant for me. I didn't react. Instead, I worked, I learned, I planned. I built quietly, patiently, without announcing milestones or seeking permission. There was power in being underestimated. No one watched closely when they believed you were failing. One evening, as I locked up my office late, I saw a familiar figure across the street. The same silver braid, the same steady eyes. She stood by a bus stop, hands folded around a worn bag. For a moment, I wondered if my mind was playing tricks on me. Then she met my gaze and inclined her head, just slightly, as if acknowledging something we both knew. I crossed the street. "You said I'd be seen," I told her. She smiled. "I said you would stop hiding." I wanted to ask her how she knew. I wanted to ask what came next, but before I could speak, the bus arrived. She stepped on, turned once more, and said, "Silence is not emptiness. It is the space where truth grows." The doors closed. The bus pulled away. I stood there alone, the city humming around me, understanding at last that my quiet wasn't weakness. It was preparation. And somewhere ahead, the balance of power was already beginning to shift. The first sign that the power had shifted wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle, almost invisible, like a weight lifting that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. One morning, my father showed up at my workplace without calling. I saw him through the glass doors before he saw me, standing stiffly in the lobby, scanning the directory as if it might judge him the way he used to judge me. For a moment, the old reflex flared, panic, the urge to rush out, to explain, to apologize for something I hadn't done. It passed. I finished my meeting first. When I finally stepped into the lobby, he turned sharply, relief and irritation flickering across his face. "You couldn't answer your phone," he said. I smiled politely. I was working. That single sentence unsettled him more than any argument would have. He cleared his throat. "We need to talk." "Do we?" I asked. He frowned. Parents aren't used to that question. They're used to obedience dressed up as respect. We sat at a small cafe nearby. He ordered out of habit. I waited until he asked. "Your mother's worried," he began. "Your sister thinks you're being dramatic. We just don't understand why you're acting like this." "I'm not acting," I said. "I'm choosing." Silence stretched between us. Not the old, heavy silence where I waited for permission to speak, but one where he searched for control and couldn't find it. "I'm doing well," I continued evenly. "I didn't leave dinner to punish anyone. I left because I finally heard the truth." He scoffed. "From who? That street woman?" The word stung, but not the way it used to. "From myself." Something shifted in his posture then. He leaned back, studying me as if seeing an unfamiliar version, one he hadn't rehearsed arguments for. A week later, my mother invited me to lunch. Just me, no audience. She chose a restaurant she knew I liked, as if nostalgia could bridge the gap. "We miss you," she said, reaching for my hand. I gently pulled back. "You miss who I used to be." Her smile faltered. "We only ever wanted what was best for you." "I know," I replied, "but what's best for me doesn't require humiliation." That word, humiliation, hung between us like a mirror she couldn't look away from. She tried to laugh it off. "You're too sensitive." I stood up. "Then it's best we keep some distance." I left cash on the table and walked out, my steps steady, my chest light. The shift became more obvious after that. Messages changed tone. Invitations softened into requests. My absence had created a vacuum they couldn't fill with jokes or blame. Meanwhile, the project I'd been building quietly crossed a threshold. A contract signed, funding secured, a launch date set, the kind of success that doesn't announce itself, it simply arrives. When my sister found out through someone else, she called immediately. "Why didn't you tell us?" I almost laughed. "You never asked." For the first time, there was nothing defensive in my voice. No hunger for approval. I didn't need them to clap for me anymore. That night, as I walked home, I passed the same street where I'd first bumped into the gypsy woman. The spot felt charged now, like the beginning of a story whose ending was finally coming into view. I understood then. Power hadn't shifted because they changed. It shifted because I did. And when you stop shrinking, the people who relied on your smallness feel it first. The invitation came disguised as reconciliation. My mother called one afternoon, her voice unusually careful. "We're having a small family gathering," she said. "Nothing formal. We thought it would be nice if you came." I almost declined out of habit. Then I heard the hesitation underneath her words, the uncertainty. They didn't know where they stood with me anymore. That alone was satisfying, but something else stirred too. Not anger, readiness. "I'll come," I said, "for a little while." The house looked the same when I arrived, but the energy didn't. Conversations dipped when I stepped inside. Smiles appeared too late, too forced. I greeted everyone politely, no warmth, no hostility, just distance. It made them nervous. Dinner was quieter this time. No jokes aimed at me. No public lessons disguised as concern. They asked neutral questions. I gave neutral answers. Then my uncle leaned forward. "So," he said casually, "what are you doing these days? Still figuring things out?" There it was, the old hook baited carefully. I smiled. Actually, things worked out. My sister raised an eyebrow. "Oh." I took a sip of water, letting the pause stretch. "Remember that startup I mentioned once, the one everyone laughed at?" A few uncomfortable glances passed around the table. "It launched last month," I continued. "We signed our third major client this morning." Silence dropped like a plate shattering. My father's fork froze midair. "What do you mean, major?" I named the company, one they all recognized, one my sister had once bragged about wanting to work for. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. "You never told us." "I wasn't invited to speak," I said gently. That was the revenge, not yelling, not accusations. Just facts delivered calmly, impossibly late for them to control. My cousin cleared his throat. "So, you're doing well then?" "I am," I said, "and I didn't need humiliation to get here." The words landed heavier than any insult. Faces flushed. Eyes dropped. The table that once fed on my discomfort now choked on my success. My sister tried to laugh it off. "Well, good for you. Guess we underestimated you." I met her gaze. "Yes, you did." No bitterness, no edge, just truth. That was when I noticed it, the way they leaned in now, the way curiosity replaced judgment. Questions followed, real ones, opportunities hinted at, pride attempted, awkward and late. I declined all of it with polite deflections. I wasn't there to reclaim my seat at the table. I was there to show them they no longer owned it. As I stood to leave, my mother reached out. "We're proud of you," she said, urgently, as if saying it fast enough could rewrite the past. I paused. I know now. Outside, the night felt lighter, cleaner. The revenge hadn't burned, it had revealed. They built their power on my silence and my need. Both were gone. Across the street, under a dim streetlight, I saw the silver braid again. The gypsy woman stood watching, her expression unreadable. I crossed toward her. "You were right," I said. "They saw me." She nodded. "And did it heal you?" I thought of the table, the silence, the stunned faces. "It freed me." She smiled then, wide and genuine. "Good, because revenge that chains you is not justice." She turned and walked away before I could thank her, her figure dissolving into the night. I stood there, understanding that the shock wasn't in what I'd said. It was in what I no longer needed to say. And one final truth waited just ahead, quieter and deeper than revenge itself. Didn't hear from them for a while after that dinner. No messages, no invitations. The silence this time wasn't punishment, it was processing. They were rearranging their understanding of me, trying to fit this new shape into an old frame. And I let them. Life moved forward in ways that felt almost unreal. Workdays filled with purpose instead of dread. Evenings where I came home tired but satisfied, not hollow. The success I'd built wasn't explosive or flashy, it was steady, grounded. It belonged to me, not to their approval. Weeks later, my father called, not to lecture, not to advise. To apologize. "I didn't know how to talk to you without pushing," he said. "I thought pressure made people better." I listened without interrupting. That alone was a kind of justice. My mother followed, her apology clumsy but sincere. She admitted, quietly, that she'd been afraid of what she didn't understand, and fear had turned into criticism. My sister took longer. When she finally reached out, there was no apology, just honesty. "I didn't like that you proved me wrong," she said. "It made me feel small." For once, she didn't try to make that my responsibility. And that was the difference. Justice didn't look like them suffering. It looked like balance being restored. Power returning to where it should have been all along, inside me. One evening, I walked the same route I'd taken months earlier, past the spot where my life had first shifted. The street was quieter now. The vendor was gone. The sidewalk looked ordinary. She wasn't there. For a moment, I felt an odd sense of loss. Then I realized something. She didn't need to be. Her role was finished. I understood now what she'd meant. Pain was the door. Humiliation was the push. Silence was the space. Power was the choice. Revenge was the mirror. But justice, that was the release. I no longer rushed toward tables where I wasn't fed. I built my own. And when I chose to invite others, it was from abundance, not need. Some nights I still think about that first collision. The coins scattering, the hurried apology, the eyes that saw straight through me. What felt like an accident had been alignment. Not magic, not fate. Just truth, arriving at the exact moment I was finally ready to carry it.